Good morning, everyone. Patty Hajdu spent $73,220 on her flights home every weekend over the course of this pandemic. Private flights home. Isn't that nice? Isn't that nice of the government to pay for that for Miss Hajdu? While she was simultaneously telling Canadians to stay home, to flatten the curve. Don't travel. Stay home. You've got to sacrifice. Everybody's got to sacrifice, except for her. She doesn't have to sacrifice. She gets to fly home whenever she wants. Interesting. Here's the Blacklocks reporting. Taxpayers paid $73,220 to Jet Health Minister Patricia Hajdu, home for weekends in Thunder Bay, even as her department told the public to avoid non-essential travel. Disclosure of those costs came as Hajdu again instructed Canadians to follow the rules. It's normal to be confused. This content is for Blacklocks reporter members only, so I can't go the rest of the way. Here is the WE scandal. The WE scandal is continuing to envelop and implode and touch other parts of the government. And this is a big deal. Make no mistake, this is a big deal. I'm going to show you some criminal code stuff that's going to make your eyebrows raise. But this, Blazing Cat Fur, and I'm using Blazing Cat Fur because I don't have a Globe and Mail subscription anymore, and this is for subscribers only. So I'll give you the link. The link is in the description, but here's the gist of the article. Blazing Cat Fur is reporting. Former We Charity chair says she resigned over concerning developments at the organization. The former chair of We Charity's Canadian Board of Directors says she resigned from her position after, quote, concerning developments at the organization, and that her exit was not part of a routine process. Michelle Douglas's comments come after the charity said its board turnover earlier this year was part of a long-planned change stemming from a 2019 review. Quote, my resignation as the chair of the board of directors of We Charity was as a result of concerning developments, Ms. Douglas told the Globe and Mail Sunday. I did not resign in the ordinary course of matters. And so there's a link there, and here's the link goes to there. So there's more to that story. But that's really the main part of it. She was tweeting about this as well when the scandal blew up, and she was calling We out, saying, "Oh, is that how many people you've impacted with it, with this initiative, whatever it was? How did you do that? Tell other people so they can replicate your results." And it was a very, I think I said at the time, it was a very tongue-in-cheek, it was a very deliberate calling out, because she knew they couldn't back up their numbers. She knew they couldn't. Those results couldn't be replicated, but they were making the claim, and in her role as a former CEO of the board of directors, or former chair, excuse me, not CEO, former chair of the board of directors, she couldn't say that's BS, but she could say, oh, wonderful, how can other people do this? And I mean, like, the game of words, man, it's always played, and she was playing by the rules. So it's interesting that the Globe and Mail followed up with her, because it's not like that was new. She tweeted that when she resigned. Like, she was very explicit and has been tweeting since she left. So it's no wonder that she had an opinion on this, and a public opinion, no less. Very interesting. Okay, here's Senator Leo Housakis, and he says, democracy in our Westminster system of parliament works only when parliamentarians do their job. It's time Liberal MPs hold Justin Trudeau and Bill Morneau to account and show them the door for the sake of our system's credibility. And this is in response to an Andrew Scheer tweet. It says, it's time for Liberal MPs to look at themselves in the mirror. How closely do they want to be associated with Justin Trudeau's unethical behavior? We need a criminal investigation. And this is 43 seconds of Andrew Scheer talking about ethics and tying, like, which liberal backbenchers want to tie their future to supporting this unethical prime minister is basically the gist of this video. You can watch it if you want. I'm not going to play it right now. Here's Section 121 of Canada's Criminal Code, says Dr. Jacobs. The stakes are very high for Trudeau, Morneau, and the Kielburgers. So, yeah, not just Trudeau and Morneau for accepting these gifts, right? These payments, these situations where fit very nicely into Section 121 of the Criminal Code here. Not only Trudeau, not only Morneau, but also the Kielburger brothers and the We organization for giving the gifts, for currying the favor that ended up with them having nearly $1 billion contract and being the only people in Canada who could possibly do it. The only ones, not the public service, not the people who are deploying our current monies to people who need it, not the CERB, CERB, whatever you call it, or any of the student loans or anything to that effect, or the student monies, summer jobs, etc. None of those systems could do it. Only we. How much did that cost we? Not much, really. When you, in the grand scheme of things, not much. Okay, here's the criminal code 121. Everyone commits an offense who, directly or indirectly, gives, offers, or agrees to give or offer to an official or to any member of his family or to anyone for the benefit of an official, or, being an official, demands, accepts, or offers or agrees to accept from any person, for himself or another person, a loan, reward, advantage, or benefit of any kind as consideration for cooperation, assistance, exercise of, influence, or an act of omission, or an act or omission in connection with the transaction of business with or any matter of business relating to the government, or a claim against Her Majesty on any benefit that Her Majesty is authorized or entitled to bestow, whether or not in fact the official is able to cooperate, render assistance, exercise influence, or do or omit to do what is proposed, as the case may be. And there's more. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but this applies to the people who offered the gifts and to the people who took the gifts. And in this case, they did take the gifts, right up until they paid for them on the day they were getting found out during testimony. Oh, I can't believe I forgot to do that. Oversight. For years, an oversight. What is the... Is it against the law, or is it no longer against the law now that Mr. Morneau has taken the gifts, given the omission, or given the act, or given the benefit, whatever the case may be, to we, and then pays for pays the bribe back, essentially, pays back the cost of the gift? Does that now clear the air? Is that okay? Trudeau's family, have they paid back the monies that they were paid through we? No. I mean, isn't that in direct contravention of this agreement, or of this law agreement, of this agreement here? This law of the land that we've got? Is it worth the website that it's published on? I don't know. I don't know anymore, because if this law doesn't apply to Mr. Morneau or Mr. Trudeau, then who does it apply to? You? Me? Are we allowed to do this? Can we just go, if we've got a business or a really good cause that you feel really, really good about, can we go and make sure, unsolicited, not registered as a lobbyist, go lobby the government until they give us enough money to do it? I mean, what's $1 million, right? To the government? Nothing. We've got a $1 billion deficit. What's another million? A billion. Hundreds of billions of dollars of deficit and $1 trillion debt, right? We've got lots of money owed. So what's another million, right? Why not just start flooding ministers' offices with unsolicited proposals for whatever, right? I don't know. I'll get 15 students to work on the interwebs talking about how it's white supremacist if you don't wear a mask. I'm sure I'll get $1 million for that. I have no doubt, actually. I probably could. If I put the work into setting up a proposal, they'd probably rush to give it to me. Maybe I should do that as an experiment, just to see if I can get $1 million unsolicited from the government. Back to this. Here is, and I'm going to move on from this. I think we is an absolute calamity. I think if there's no investigation, and there was one for Duffy, for bribery, et cetera, then we've fallen a lot further, and there seems no real demand. There's not even as much of a demand for an investigation into this, and I realize that the investigation is ongoing in the committees and in the finance committee and in our current House. There's processes going on, but there was a lot more happening with the $16 orange juice and the $90,000 right scandal, right? Like this is being buried. This is being absolutely ignored. So I'm very aware of what the laws are, and very aware that Teflon Trudeau and his merry crew probably aren't going to suffer much consequence for this. Maybe a poll drop until the next round of money gets handed out, right? Okay, so moving on from that, because until the opposition, I know this is the second time I said I'm moving on and gone back to talk about it, but until the opposition get their stuff together and have a confidence vote, we got nothing. There's nothing. They're still in charge. Unless the RCMP come and arrest all the MPs in the government and say, yeah, this whole thing's been X, Y, Z, and this is why we're arresting these people, which I don't think will happen. I'm just saying, unless that happens, there's nothing going to change in our governance. Okay? You understand? And that's frustrating, because it's terribly, terribly, awfully, the governance that we're currently receiving is not reflective of what most Canadians want, in my opinion. So the representation or taxation without representation is in play, and people are upset about that, right? If the government doesn't do what you want them to do, and then instead does like increases immigration instead of keeps it at the same, or lowers immigration in response to a crippling pandemic that has destroyed a lot of businesses, right? I mean, things like that, right? The government is out of step with what the people want, and yet they're continuing to do whatever they want. That's the same on a lot of things. Spending outside of the country is another example. What happened to all the infrastructure spending Trudeau campaigned on in 2015? Up in smoke, gone, right? Some infrastructure bank in Asia. Okay, now I'm moving on. Here is Lake Witch, and I saw this and I thought, what's this about? Does anyone know why the Chinese military are holding military training on Salt Spring Island, BC? Nope, I don't know. Here's the video.
Military personnel on the road coming up. Check out this. Holy cow. Whoa. On Salt Spring Island. And they're all Chinese military. Wow. I wonder what...
Okay, so the Chinese military part is speculation. A lot of them are female. They're women. Like if you look at the hair, and I thought, the first time I watched this video, I thought, I don't know if that looks like Chinese military too. They're slight. And not like, they're slight like women, right? The shape is wrong for a lot of men. It's not the way men walk. This might be a man, but most of them are women. Just look at the hair, right? Maybe another man, I don't know, tall woman. But still, it struck me as odd, so I started looking for it. I found the Breaker News and a CTV news article. The CTV news article is talking about a Surrey murder victim and Golden Touch, which is, I think, a cult. And this is the Breaker News, how military-style boot camp on Salt Spring is related to a Surrey murder mystery. This is a wild story. This is like a very strange story. I'm going to give you just a little taste, and then we'll finish off with anti-masking. It's exactly what you think it is. Okay, here we go. Here is the exclusive, how a military-style boot camp on Salt Spring Road is related to a Surrey murder mystery. I just said that, I know, sorry. Joe Clemente says he never leaves his Salt Spring Island home without his camera. You never know what next surprise you'll catch on video, Clemente told CTV News Vancouver reporter David Molko in an interview. Not a lot of things shocked me, but that shocked me. We don't have any military bases here, Clemente said, still wondering if he happened upon training for a cult. If it was hippies with dreadlocks, I wouldn't even think twice about it. We have a lot of earthy people out here. I say, it's just a bunch of hippies out on a march. This was completely different. Isn't that Antifa? No? Okay. Probably not hippies, but okay. Another area resident, Kathy Weisner, was gardening when she spotted what she thought were cadets training one afternoon the week before Clemente's experience. Their commander barked instructions in a language other than English. I scroll down. Bo Fan, a 41-year-old who came to Canada from China in February 2019, was the victim of a murder on June 17th. RCMP initially pinpointed a property on 27th Avenue, the headquarters of Create Abundance International Institute Incorporated, which owns Mineral Springs, the venue for the boot camps. This is very strange if it's connected to the place here on our island, Clemente said. A manager at the resort said he didn't have direct contact info for the owners, but said he would pass along a request for comment. I think that's a really good... No, I'll pass it on to the owners. Okay, bye. Back to this. A source connected to Peace Arch Hospital told the Breaker.News that Fan had been badly beaten and her injuries included a broken femur, possibly the result of being struck by a vehicle. She had been taken to the emergency ward around 5:30 a.m. by her brother and sister-in-law. Sergeant Frank Jang of the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team told Malco that both have cooperated with detectives. Fan was employed by Create Abundance and its affiliate Golden Touch. The multi-level marketing organizations are based on a spiritual, psychological, and financial philosophy book. So it's not Chinese military, so I wanted to put that to rest. But what it is seems to be like a military-style boot camp, and it's a whole lot deeper. It goes way, way past what I usually look at. It's a crime story, certainly, so it's very interesting. Links in the description if you're interested, but man, very, very, very strange. Okay, on to anti-masking. This I saw, and I think that it's really interesting when the CBC gives arguments but no evidence about whatever they want. And this is a very interesting one. They're tying, so this was published today, July 27th at 4 a.m. Gotta love those 4 a.m. publishing pieces. And this is CBC News, and it says anti-masking groups draw from anti-vaccination playbook to spread misinformation. Now, there's a lot wrong with this article. There's a lot wrong with the information they're putting forward, and I'm going to show you why I think that. I'm not just going to say they're wrong, and I mean, I don't usually not prove my point, so I'm going to back it up with links. But what they're doing in this article isn't trying to convince people like me that they're right. What they're doing in this article is trying to give people enough of an argument to push back on people like me who try and say masks are against our rights, like our basic human rights. Having mandatory masks is against it. If you want to wear a mask, you wear a mask. That's fine by me. But having them mandated is a different thing altogether. And what they're doing is they're encapsulating an argument. This is what they're going to say to you. This is how you should respond. And so by doing this, they're creating a blanket response against. So like, right away, if you're talking to somebody who's been indoctrinated by these pro-mask people, and it's unbelievable that we have to get here because, like I said yesterday, Nova Scotia starts mandatory masks on July 31st. That's Friday. They haven't had a new case in 11 days, and they have, I think, like one case island-wide, and he's at home. So there's zero chance, right? Very, very little chance. Anyway, mandating masks in spite of the evidence that this thing is going away by itself. It's very, very odd. They don't have any arguments against the valid criticisms against a lot of these things. They're packaging up an argument and giving it to their reader base. All right, let's jump in. As more regions across the country adopt mandatory masking policies in an effort to minimize the spread of COVID-19, some anti-masking groups are joining forces with anti-vaccination proponents and adopting their techniques to spread misinformation and amplify their message. The similarities between organized anti-masking and anti-vaccine movements are striking, said Maya Goldenberg, an associate professor of philosophy at the University of Guelph, specializing in vaccine hesitancy. A philosophy professor? Specializing in vaccine hesitancy. Wow, very interesting. I scroll down. Although many Canadians who don't want to wear masks aren't opposed to vaccines, the fact that anti-vaccination groups are involved in the relatively new anti-masking movement is concerning to many health experts. They call it relatively new because they're trying to discredit it. And the fact that it's relatively new is because the anti-masking law or the masking laws are new, right? Back to this. Despite the well-established evidence that vaccines are safe and effective, anti-vaccination groups have become savvy at spreading misinformation that leads people to distrust medical guidance, something that can have dire consequences during a pandemic. So this broad generalization that vaccines are safe, there are classes of vaccines that I believe are worth the risk, right? There are vaccinations like the MMR, and I know there are people who disagree with me, but that's fine. I'm just going to set out my opinion, and you can have your opinion, and whatever. I'm not trying to change your mind about vaccines. But there are vaccines that I've given my kids because I've had them, and they seem safe, and the risk-reward is acceptable to me. And so those types of vaccines, the most of the childhood vaccines that you usually get, no problem. A new vaccine that is developed by the Chinese military in 1/10 of the time, and rolled out in Canada for testing purposes, and rolled out in Canada in less than a year for this vaccine, for COVID-19, yeah, that's, I think, a completely different thing. And lumping all vaccines are safe is irresponsible reporting, in my opinion. Here's a vaccine. That's asymptomatic. Here's a vaccine. Ministers lose fight to stop payouts over swine flu vaccine, jab, narcolepsy cases. Dozens of British children who developed narcolepsy as a result of swine flu vaccine could be compensated after the High Court rejected a government appeal to withhold payments. 6 million people in Britain and more across Europe were given the pandemic's vaccine made by GlaxoSmithKline during the 2009-10 swine flu pandemic, but the jab was withdrawn after doctors noticed a sharp rise in narcolepsy among those who received it. The sleep disorder is permanent and can cause people to fall asleep dozens of times a day. Some narcoleptics have night terrors and a muscular condition called cataplexy that can lead them to collapse on the spot. In 2015, a 12-year-old boy known as John for the proceedings was awarded £120,000 by a court that ruled he had been left severely disabled by narcolepsy caused by the vaccine. He was 7 when he had the jab and developed symptoms within months. Because of his tiredness, John became disruptive at school and found it almost impossible to make friends. He takes several naps a day, cannot shower or take a bus on his own. He may never be allowed to drive a car. There are real impacts to vaccines, and in May 2020, they put out a discredit to this news report saying that the vaccine maker GlaxoSmithKline, GSK, says that it was actually the vaccine that caused, not the vaccine, it was the flu that caused the narcolepsy, not the vaccine. So they're trying to say that it wasn't the vaccine's fault, it was the flu's fault. Isn't that wild? The vaccine is meant to fight the flu. If it causes that in combination with the flu, I don't know if there's any other examples of the flu with people who didn't get the flu causing narcolepsy from people who didn't get the vaccine. Excuse me. I was organizing my thoughts there. Okay, back to this. Although scientists are continuing to learn a lot about the novel coronavirus, it appears that people with COVID-19 can be most infectious before they show any symptoms, Oten said. This is a doctor they found. And here's WHO backtracking on claim asymptomatic spread of COVID-19 is very rare. And the pushback of this is not that it's not very rare, it's that the data is inconclusive. Here it is. A top official with the World Health Organization has walked back statements that the spread of COVID-19 from people who do not show symptoms is very rare amid backlash from experts who have questioned the claim due to a lack of data. They're not questioning this statement because they can prove different. They're questioning the statement because of a lack of data. So there's no data to support the article's hypothesis. And like I said, they're not looking to prove to people like me they're right. They're looking to package up an argument and give it to their readership. Back to this. That's different from many other viruses, including the first version of SARS. It's a key reason why it's important for people to wear masks, even if they feel perfectly healthy, when physical distancing isn't possible to prevent transmission, medical experts say. Mistrust of health authorities fuels misinformation. Mistrust of government and scientific authorities are a key characteristic among both anti-vaccination and anti-masking advocates, Goldenberg said. It's hard to take seriously any of the recommendations when they are so inconsistent. Black Lives Matter protests, no virus. But if you go to a Trump rally, lots of virus. It just doesn't make sense. Here is a person, this is a masks versus anti-masks debate. The person who is advocating pro-mask gives evidence like this. And the evidence, this is not scientific evidence. If you have a controlled trial, which is you have people who are masked versus people who are unmasked versus people who are wearing cloth masks versus N95 masks, you can see very clearly what masks work and what masks don't. None of the evidence used in the pro-mask side uses controlled evidence or controlled trials. They all use garbage like this. Here's what's his name? Dr. Kevin Johnson, I think, the first one. This guy, the longer the debate goes on, the more unhinged he gets. It's really, really interesting because his argument is very flimsy and very flimsy all through the whole argument here. He's got 15 minutes to present his argument. This is his conclusion. Very flimsy. And then as soon as the other person gets to start his argument, this guy starts getting unhinged, and by the end, it's quite funny, really. He doesn't prove his point; he just gets angry. So here he is talking really quick about pro-masks and the data they're using to prove this, which is just flimsy.
Now, you can't do a direct controlled experiment where you blindly throw non-infected people into rooms with masked or unmasked infected persons and see if they get sick. That's unethical. But all the ethical ways to study this question indirectly indicate that cloth masks curb the spread. For example, transmission rates slowed in hospitals, German cities, North Texas, and in US states after mandates went into effect. In Germany, they reduced growth rates by like 40%. What's more, US states with mandates have seen much less spread than those without, as have countries where mask use is popular. Modeling has also confirmed the effectiveness of mask mandates. According to Strutt and Eckelberry, if masks are just 50% effective, they could help bring down infection rates to non-academic levels.
So they're not using studies that say masks work this much, blah, 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 as shown by this many people not having infections, blah, 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 through actual trials in areas where there are infected people. They're saying that using transmission rates slowed percentages extrapolates over to mask usage works. And that's the modeling. If masks are 50% effective, they can help bring infection rates down to non-epidemic levels. Well, that's just in the model. And the models are absolute trash. And the actual studies that they've done with influenza. So influenza is spread in a similar way to COVID-19, right? It's a respiratory virus that is coughed and spread by droplet, right? And it's somewhere between aerosolized and droplet infection. And if you watched what was his name at the beginning? I can't remember. Dr. John, something, doesn't matter. He explained that aerosolization was kind of a spectrum, right? These people should know what a spectrum looks like, just like gender in that world, because it's not the real world. So the spectrum of aerosolization is not even looked at with regard to with regard to do masks work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's irresponsible to be pushing this so conclusively, and especially when the data they're using to back this up is so flimsy. And the rebuttal basically says right at the beginning, any study relying on this kind of data is usually quickly destroyed as soon as you get actual data, actual controlled trials. As soon as you get controlled trials, the controlled trials just disprove it. And then he also goes back and uses the influenza studies and all of the other stuff that you would expect somebody who's prepared for a debate would use. Here's some evidence, here's the numbers, here's what it says. Masks don't work. Masks don't work. Masks don't work to curb influenza spread. Masks don't work to curb COVID-19, despite what the experts say, right? The experts are using faulty models, just like with the climate garbage. It's very, very insidious, because if they can make you believe it, you'll argue with their pre-approved CBC written talking points, right? Here's the CBC last bit of information for this morning. Man, 26 minutes again. Last bit of information this morning. Mr. Galati, I think I'm getting that right. I think people gave me advice and now I forgot it about how to pronounce his name. Oh well. This is about that. A lawsuit alleges vaccine conspiracy. Vaccine Choice Canada, along with several individual plaintiffs, filed a statement of claim that the Ontario Superior Court of Justice this month against public health and political leaders in several municipalities, as well as the province of Ontario and the federal government, including Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Chief Public Health Officer Dr. Theresa Tam, and the Queen. The lawsuit claims COVID-19 public health measures, including lockdowns, physical distancing, and mandatory masking, are violations of constitutional rights. It also claims that the pandemic was unnecessarily declared to further non-medical agendas, including to establish a new economic world order and a massive and concentrated push for mandatory vaccines of every human on the planet with concurrent electronic surveillance. Canadian public health officials have never suggested that a coronavirus vaccine, when developed, would be mandatory. The lawsuit also names the CBC, accusing it of Stalinist censorship by knowingly refusing to cover and or publish the valid and sound criticisms of the COVID measures. It's not clear when or whether the lawsuit will proceed through the courts. Cherry-picking data. Another commonly used tactic by both anti-masking and anti-vaccine organizations is cherry-picking research and studies that appear to support their viewpoint but are often outdated or taken out of context, said McGill University's Dr. Otten. For example, anti-masking groups often incorrectly claim that wearing a mask is harmful because it reduces the supply of oxygen and causes people to breathe toxins back into their own body. That's misinformation with no basis in fact. Really, Mr. Otten? Why do cribs have slats in them then? Hey? Why aren't we putting masks on infant children? Hey? If a lack of oxygen isn't a problem for human people. Isn't that interesting? Dr. Otten is not honest, in my opinion, in his estimate, in his what is the word? Diagnosis I'll use of this whole situation. And he uses the surgeons wear these kind of procedural masks in the operating theater for sometimes hours and hours at a time. The surgeons are not dropping from lack of oxygen; they simply aren't. And that was never the claim either. The claim is that you could get hypoxia, and hypoxia causes headaches, tiredness, shortness of breath, all sorts of different negative outcomes that COVID-19 doesn't necessarily cause, but could make people feel sick. This mandatory masking is very, very, very damaging. And just because they found one doctor who's willing to talk about it, who's willing to diminish the amount of potential harm that lack of oxygen gives to humans, or lack of oxygen presents to humans, it doesn't mean that it's true. So I don't know. There's so much misinformation, and we're at a point where they're not above outlawing whatever they deem misinformation. Right, and they're at the point where they've got the power. They outlawed QAnon on Twitter. How can you do that? It's a letter of the alphabet. Don't use the letter Q. How dare you? They probably just demonetized my channel or my video for talking about Q. But that's how crazy That's how crazy we are. That's how round the bend we are. There was an article I was using. It was a 2015 study about surgical masks versus cloth masks versus N95s in medical settings. And I said, like, See, the cloth masks are a lot worse because it's 3%. It blocks 3%, but it holds it holds moisture, and it is a net negative effect to the person. And the person came back and said, "That's old data. You don't even understand how science works." I was like, "All right, sure. Maybe I don't. Show me the updated study." And he sent me the study with the garbage. It was this one. The transmission rate slowed after the masks were mandated at these places. I was like, that's not evidence, dude. Because it's not. It's ridiculous. Okay, that's enough for me. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. I'm hopefully recording tomorrow with Greg, and maybe Thursday with Kelly, but I haven't called her, so I'll call her. I'll call Kelly. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.